Hi everyone, this is Katy Groves, and I want to apologize for any background noise that is present in this video. So in this video, I'm going to be addressing a topic that I have been wanting to make a video about, but I simply had not reached a place of integration within my dissociative system, a place of healing from my traumas in order to do it until now. I've thought a lot about how to approach this, and I've decided that what I'm going to go ahead and do is make what's probably going to end up being a series of testimonies about experiences that I had in trying to escape child trafficking, and also experiences that I had as an adult coming in contact with people I suspected to be trafficking victims. And I'm just going to be talking about how people dealt with me when I tried to escape, how I've dealt with people when I've noticed that I think they're in such situations, and I'm just going to try to be as helpful as possible. I know that I cannot give a comprehensive guide to any of this stuff. One of the main things that I want to get across is that these situations are deeply complex and that there is no single right way to handle them all. So I guess I'm just going to go ahead and start. For now, I'm only going to give one story about me trying to escape as a child. It'll probably still be a while before I'll be able to give more, but I will be able to give multiple stories about things I've witnessed happening to others. So this is one of my most vivid memories, one of my most potent memories of childhood that never split off. I never fully compartmentalized it away and separated from it consciously as if it didn't happen to me. In the memory, I'm running away from my father. I'm going to pause real quick and just acknowledge that I started talking about this in the present tense and I started going into a flashback. I'm going to try really hard to stay grounded and not do that, and to talk about this in the past tense instead. So I was running away from my father, who was trafficking me and programming me in trauma-based mind control programming. And we were on my street, basically. I lived in a cul-de-sac, and I had managed to escape out of the cul-de-sac and was running right around the corner down the main street off of where the cul-de-sac was. My father was chasing me in his car, and he was leaning out the window, and he was saying something horrible, I think, but I don't remember what it was. And I have this out-of-body memory of me that indicates that I was barefoot and terrified. I think I might have been crying, but I'm not sure. And this sort of thing happened periodically in my childhood. But the reason this memory stood out to me is that there was a couple standing nearby on the street, a young Latino couple. They looked rather street themselves, and this was extremely out of place in the neighborhood that I was in. I grew up in the Great Hills neighborhood of Austin, Texas, for most of my childhood, and that's where I was at that time. And for anyone who knows what that neighborhood is like, you'll know that it is extremely white, upper middle class, but there are a lot of organized criminals who live there who are a lot wealthier than they appear, and a lot more powerful than they appear. And it's honestly a scary place to be, whether you're an outsider or not, but especially if you're an outsider, and especially if you are the kinds of people that the couple who was standing on the street appeared to be. And I remember wondering what this couple was doing there, and I remember looking intensely into the eyes of the girl. It was a young heterosexual couple, and she was looking just stricken. Like, her eyes were really big. She looked extremely upset and afraid. I could feel that she recognized the kind of nature of the situation that I was in, and that it affected her very deeply. The guy that she was with, he looked like he was intoxicated on something, maybe slightly drunk or stoned or something. And he didn't appear as empathetic, although I'm not trying to place judgments on what kind of person he was. I'm just saying I didn't get the same connection from him. And I noticed that the girl, she had a flip phone in her hand and was, I assume, aiming to call the police, or thinking about calling the police at least. And I remember her eyes never left me when the guy that she was with kind of quietly put his hands over the flip phone and closed it. And I remember there was no verbal communication, but I was fully aware of everything that was going on, I think. And I remember thinking to myself that I was glad that the guy stepped in and that they were not going to call the police. Because if they had, I would not have been rescued. I was in high-level military intelligence child trafficking. My father was a CIA agent, and there was absolutely no way that getting the police involved was going to make that better. I don't know how many of you watching this know much about the Austin Police Department, but they are notoriously corrupt, and there was extensive police involvement in the stuff that I grew up in as a child. And if the cops had been called, I would have been further victimized. I would not have been rescued. I probably would have been raped and brutalized by the police. And the couple possibly, very possibly, would have been arrested simply for being brown and poor and in this neighborhood. And of course, for getting in the way of the child trafficking operation and calling the cops and so on. So I remember thinking at the time that it was absolutely for the best. And I remember wishing the couple well and wishing that I would have some way out of my situation that didn't involve the police. And the reason I think that it's really important that I share all this is that while it's not always the wrong thing to do to call the police when you suspect that someone's being trafficked or abused, if you see what looks like child abuse or child trafficking, it's not always the wrong thing to call the police. And I don't want people to misinterpret me and think that I'm saying that they should never, ever call the police. However, there are many circumstances in which calling the police on suspected child trafficking, especially when it involves military, mafia type families like my family, it can just make things worse. And so it's really important to use discernment and to act with mindfulness and compassion. There are times to call the police, and there are times not to call the police. And that was one of those times where it was best that those people did not call the police. And it wasn't that they did nothing for me. And this is another very important point that I want to make here. They absolutely did not do nothing for me. Like I said, the guy I didn't connect with very much emotionally, but the girl, the look in her eyes and the look on her face showed that she cared deeply and was extremely distraught about the complexities of the situation and not being able to do what she wanted to do, which was clearly to rescue me. And that meant a tremendous amount to me and tremendously motivated me to get out of MK. I've shared before on here in my series about how people can help. It's called How Can I Help? The MK Survivor FAQ videos I've done. I'll put a link to that in the description below. This video will go in that playlist, I think. I've shared before in there how people were not able to directly rescue me because of my situation in Mkultra with the programming, but they were able to show me love and compassion in ways that enabled me to develop a worldview that made it possible for me to get out myself. Meaning that I saw enough kindness and compassion while I was a slave. I saw that enough people cared that I felt able to reach out and try to get the help that I needed when finally I was old enough to be able to. So that girl did a lot for me. She connected with me, she showed that she cared, and she did try to do something before her boyfriend, likely wisely, stopped her. So that's my story about that. And now I'm going to talk about, I'm going to start by talking about an experience I had at a grocery store. I don't remember how old I was probably 19 or 20. This was a couple years ago. It was before I started this channel, when I was living in the last town that I lived in before the one I'm in now. And for safety reasons, I'm not going to say what it is, but it's in Northern California. Not a big city, but not the smallest town either. And I was at this rather high-end grocery store. And I saw a middle-aged, maybe 40 years old, I would say, maybe 45-year-old, white, wealthy-looking, professional-type guy with very cold eyes, sadistic smile, and just terrible energy, walking with a younger woman who's maybe mid-20s. She looked to be of Southeast Asian descent, which, as many of you probably know, would put a target on her for human trafficking, as Southeast Asians are very heavily trafficked in this world, a very heavily targeted population. And I tried not to stare too much, but these people caught my eye really intensely because, unlike the guy, the woman did not seem calm or collected at all. The guy seemed very calm in a psychopathic kind of way, like very much like in his element, very high on the power that he was getting off on in the moment. She looked absolutely terrified in this kind of way that just tipped me off super heavily as a survivor of trafficking and made me think that she herself was being trafficked. So I started watching them a bit, and I don't remember all of what happened, but I remember that I was alone except for them, sitting in the area of the store where people can eat their food. And she was walking with the guy, the woman was walking with the guy, and she said something to him, absolutely desperately, basically begging him in so many, it's basically what it looked like, is what I'm trying to say. Without overtly doing it, she's basically begging him to let them stay there and eat the food in the store so that they could prolong going back to his place, which is where they were heading. And he got this really sick smile, and he kind of laughed, maybe not exactly laughed out loud, but you could tell there was laughter in him. And he said, no, we can go back and eat at my place. And she didn't say anything, but she looked absolutely desperate. And I got this horrendous feeling watching them, that she was a trafficking victim, he was a trafficker, or a wealthy buyer of trafficked slaves, at least for his own personal use or something awful like that. And they were going back to his place, and I got this horrendous feeling that he was going to kill her. But all of this was gut feeling. Absolutely nothing illegal that a cop could identify, at least, had happened. And I knew that were I to try to step in and do anything, it could be just like what happened when I was a kid with that couple, where if they'd called the police, they would have ended up getting fucked up by the cops. I would have ended up getting fucked up by the cops. I would have not gotten rescued, and things would have gotten worse. And for me at the time, I was a trafficking victim still, as in I was still dealing with some accessing the mind control. Even though I had made a ton of progress getting out of MK, I was still stuck in some of that stuff more than I am now. And so it would have been dangerous in so many ways and counterproductive in so many ways for me to have called the police in that moment. So as agonizing as it was, I let them go. And I caught a glimpse of the woman's reflection in the mirror when she walked out of the store. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say mirror. I mean the glass door, but it was reflective like a mirror. I don't have words for it, but it was extremely haunting. It was as if she was already a ghost. It felt to me as if she was already dead. And I'm not trying to be overly dramatic here. I'm just trying to sincerely give an account of what I experienced. After that, I felt absolutely dejected and helpless and bereaved. And I think I might have already been planning to do this. I was on the right side of town to be able to do it. But whether I was planning to or not, I decided to go to the college campus nearby and basically sneak into one of the practice rooms, even though I wasn't a student, and play the piano and just get my feelings out, all of my grief that had come up around this, and do energy work and healing and basically musical prayer for this woman. And I felt as though there was absolutely nothing that I could do through prayer or energy work to save her life, but I still, I did my own set of prayers, basically internal death rituals that I learned to do when I was in the trafficking ring as a child, watching people die all the time who I couldn't help in any other way. And so that's what I did, and I don't believe that that was nothing, but I believe that was not only the best thing that I could do, but it was probably the right thing that anybody could have done, because once again, this town that I was in, the police were extremely corrupt, and calling the cops would have been very unlikely to do anything but make the situation worse, for not just me, but for the woman and probably other trafficking victims also. So once again, I want to be clear that I'm not telling people never to go to the police. I'm just trying to give stories from my personal experience that may help people understand why sometimes going to the police is not the best thing to do. And I'm going to pause here and I'm going to talk more about that before giving more anecdotes. So I'm just going to go ahead and say a few words about the whole notion of going to the police, and then I'm going to have to upload this and record a part 2. So there are times when it is correct to go to the police. And I think that it's important to understand that in most of those cases, it will be not because the police in the area are not corrupt, but because it would just so happen to be one of those times where the police would decide to actually free the victim or multiple victims involved in order to look like they're doing something. This is something that law enforcement agencies routinely do. They do occasional trafficking busts to try to keep the public thinking that they care. And there have been times when people have called the police when they suspected human trafficking without actually even seeing anything obviously illegal, and the police have stepped in and freed the victims, so it seems, in order to keep their appearances up. And so it's not always the wrong thing. However, most of the time, from what I've seen, going through a lifetime of this kind of exploitation, the cops are almost universally corrupt. The agencies at least are. Even if there are cops that care within the organization, they're pretty impotent to do anything. And unless you just happen to catch them in a moment where they feel inclined to keep their appearances up and do a bust, they're probably not going to help the victims that you have called. And like I've said, in many cases, it could lead to punishment and abuse for the victims and make things worse. There's also the issue of re-trafficking by the cops. Cops are notorious for re-trafficking, trafficking victims. They will pick up victims and act like they're going to rescue them and then send them right back to their traffickers. And I've heard testimonies of people who weren't even in Mkultra like I was, but who were still trafficked, on lower levels, who went through this repeatedly, and it's just a terrible thing. And of course, I don't know for sure that they weren't in Mkultra, but I'm pretty sure, given the context, that they weren't. So yeah, it's a very difficult thing. Another huge issue is if you do witness something obviously illegal, then you could be legally required to call the police. And if you don't, you could potentially get in some kind of trouble. If you are an ally to the survivor community, then throwing yourself under the bus and not calling the police when you could be held legally accountable for that could be a problem, and could be something that could really hurt the survivor community, as we need all the allies that we can have. And so I think one thing I really want to make clear is that it's important to know your own worth, your own value as an ally. If you are a very kind, compassionate person who cares enough about this to be actually listening to what I'm saying right now and really taking it in, then you're probably too valuable to sacrifice. And so you may want to really keep that in mind as well. It's very important to not make yourself liable in certain circumstances, even if calling the police wouldn't truly help the victims involved.